Thank you for joining us for this detailed webinar on Ohio's Workers' Compensation Other States Coverage Program. My name is Jeff Smith, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs and General Counsel for the Ohio Insurance Agents Association.
My name is Carolyn Mangus. I am the Government Affairs Manager for OIA, and I have been working on this issue for probably about the past 6 years, and am working very closely with BWC on the Other States Coverage Program and on its implementation.
So we both work with the Ohio Insurance Agents Association. I want to give you a little bit of brief background on who we are as an organization. We represent about 1,500 independent insurance agencies across the state of Ohio. Our members, independent insurance agents, provide about 82% of the commercial coverage in the state and about 44% of the personal insurance coverage in our state. Our mission is to promote, protect, and progress the professional advice and guidance that only independent insurance agents provide. So we are happy to discuss with you today the purpose of this program and how it came to fruition and how we expect agents and employers to utilize this coverage option for their out-of-state workers' compensation coverage needs. So this program really started with the fundamental premise of ensuring that Ohio employers have an additional workers' compensation coverage option when they have employees working out of state on a temporary or permanent basis. And really the problem is an issue in Ohio in large part because we have a state-run monopolistic workers' compensation system. While we have a significant insurance company essentially in the Bureau of Workers' Compensation, they are not recognized as an insurer of workers' compensation outside of this state. And so it creates a potential coverage gap. The program is designed for state workers' compensation exposures that for those employers that have been unable to secure coverage in the private marketplace. So if you have coverage, this is not designed for you. If your clients have coverage, it's not designed for them. It is truly designed for those small businesses that have limited exposures, that are unable to collect or unable to get workers' compensation coverage. So it could be a large business too, it could be any size business really, but what we have had agents talk to us about over the last several years is that there are situations where they are unable to secure coverage in the private marketplace for their out-of-state exposures, and that's what this program was designed for. Just to get into a couple of the examples where we have heard and have been shared with us, and there's a lot more than this, but we're just going to share a couple really quick of situations where agents have called the OIA and said, look, there's no marketplace here for this small contractor who is predominantly based in Ohio, and the overwhelming majority, the predominant amount of their business is in the state of Ohio. But they may be along the border, or they may bid for a job in another state and they get awarded that job. And the immediate question is, what do we do to ensure that we're complying with the workers' compensation laws in that state? So let's take Pennsylvania for example. Pennsylvania has been very aggressive in the enforcement of their workers' compensation laws. And in large part, they're one of the main reasons why we advocated so strongly for this legislation, because we had agents calling us about concerns that their employers who are working in Pennsylvania with Ohio workers' compensation coverage, the PA Bureau would find that they did not have coverage, that they were essentially uninsured. They would threaten stop work orders, fines, civil, criminal penalties, and again, it was a very harsh impact and consequence for employers and for agents, especially those agents who are dealing with smaller subcontractors who they could not secure a policy in the private marketplace. So again, we developed this product. There's other examples too, like the plumber, which Carolyn will tell you a little bit about.
So this is a similar example to what Jeff was talking about. A plumber perhaps could be having their business is primarily located in Ohio. However, let's say that they are in Cincinnati. And so based on their location of where their business is in the state, they're most likely going to be, driving across I-275 into Kentucky to perform some work, on occasion. And so we've heard from members over the years that, an instance like this is problematic. Kentucky is also a state that is very aggressive, much like Pennsylvania. They will not recognize Ohio BWC's coverage in their state as being adequate to meet their workers' compensation coverage requirements. So other examples would be, the example that Jeff gave about Pennsylvania. I mean, that could be a very real scenario that would occur, with somebody who might be located in Youngstown. Youngstown is close to the border, so they could be traveling across the PA, just like Cincinnati into Kentucky and Toledo into Michigan. So in these examples, if there has been the ability to obtain coverage through the private market that has been adequate, that's great. But this program was designed for those smaller businesses who, like Jeff said, have not been able to get coverage through the private market, and it's been, probably pretty expensive to go to the state funds and also time-consuming. Another example would be, this program could help somebody who is an Ohio employer who has employees who attend conferences out of state that are, frequent, or maybe conferences that are lengthy. So this would also help in that instance where coverage in the private marketplace is probably not going to be available.
And, to share some real life examples, Carolyn alluded to it. We've had agents call recently with situations where, again, Ohio domiciled employer with an employee who lives along the border and happens to live in Pennsylvania or in Kentucky. So they're residents of those states. If they are injured on a job in their home state, even if the employer would like them to file the claim back in Ohio and they think they have coverage back in Ohio, if they are injured on the job in one of those other states, the employee has the ability to file a claim in their home state, therein creating the situation where the employer who has Ohio workers' compensation may be found to be uninsured, and they may have to cover the cost of that coverage out of pocket. So this type of coverage is intended for those situations, and let's get further into it. Again, as we move through, I want to emphasize this point. If you're an agent or an employer and your agent has secured coverage for you in the private marketplace, this product is not intended to replace that. It's not intended to compete with coverage that's available in the private marketplace. And so this coverage became available on March 1st. That was the starting date for the Bureau and for the other parties that are involved, which Carolyn is now going to get into telling you a little bit more about those parties. But before we do that, I just want to add one thing. Now that the coverage is available, you will see more and more communications and outreach efforts to the employer community and to various other parties. So I will tell you, the independent insurance agents across the state are going to hear a lot about this, and they will probably be the ones that are driving the efforts to educate the employer community on this activity. BWC has also set up, a lot of information on their website. Various parties have done press releases. They've focused on this effort and initiative in social media. BWC is doing they have some regional representatives who are out talking about the program to various meetings and groups. The trade association, so in addition to the OIA, you'll also see the Chamber of Commerce and the regional groups talking about it, the NFIB, and other employer groups, as well as the TPAs, those entities that run the workers' comp group rating programs. They're going to be talking about this with the Ohio's employers. And BWC is also doing programs at the Ohio Safety Congress and Expo on this, and probably will be into the future. So there is a significant effort underway to educate employers on their potential exposure. And again, we expect independent insurance agents to be the leading voice and advisors on those exposures and the risks and the solutions to resolve those issues. So with that, I'll move over to Carolyn.
So let's talk in depth about the parties that are going to be involved in this other states coverage program and in the transaction. So first, of course, we have the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Comp. They are, going to be handling basically all of the eligibility requirements and determining, if the employers are eligible for the program, as well as doing the underwriting for the actual coverage. BWC has actually entered into a contract, and this was all done through RFP process. And the RFP, the contract was awarded to United States Insurance Services, which is USIS. They are a broker, essentially, that operates this type of program in, I believe, 6 other states in addition to Ohio. They've been in this marketplace and basically developed this other states program, and I believe it first started in Maryland. The insurer that's going to be involved is Zurich, and so the policy that is going to be issued is actually a Zurich insurance policy. And then, of course, we are going to have agents, independent insurance agents, that are going to be involved, because independent agents are going to be the one who understand this type of program, and that there is a necessity for this type of coverage for certain exposures that might exist.
So I'm going to let Carolyn cover in a little greater detail the parties. She gave you a pretty good overview to start, but I think it's important to really drill down in the details and talk about who exactly USIS is, what their role is, and also Zurich, because those are the 2 main parties that the employer community is going to see and possibly interact with, and that you all as independent insurance agents are going to interact with. So Carolyn, go ahead.
So as I mentioned, USIS and Zurich, they are involved. Zurich is actually the insurance company, and Zurich is authorized to do business in all 50 states, with the exception of those that are currently and have a monopolistic system. So North Dakota, Washington, and Wyoming are not going to be, you're not permitted to have private workers' comp insurance in those states. And like I indicated earlier, USIS is the vendor that was selected by the Ohio BWC. They were selected through an RFP process to basically bring this program to Ohio. They are a broker, and as I indicated, they actually created this program. And so they have brought with them Zurich as the insurer on the back end. And basically, I had indicated that USIS is very experienced in this marketplace of other states coverage. They operate in 7 other states in addition to now operating in Ohio. So they are very experienced at this type of coverage program. And I want to talk a little bit further about what this means with all of these parties involved. So the agent of record that is going to be listed on the policy that is issued is actually going to be USIS. And the insurance company, it is going to be a Zurich insurance policy. And just to reiterate some of the questions that we've had from our members along the way, we've had people ask, will USIS be able to contact my clients? No, they will not be able to contact your clients. And they're also not going to be able to use any type of information that they obtain from operating this program to gain a competitive advantage in the future. Let's talk a little bit about Zurich. So they are essentially what is referred to as the fronting insurer for the other states coverage program. And as I indicated before, everything is going to be done up front with the Bureau, but it's going to be a Zurich policy that is issued. And basically what the Bureau is doing is they are reinsuring 100% of the claims cost for this program with Zurich. And again, the real benefit of having Zurich involved is that they are one of the largest workers' compensation providers in the country. I believe they're actually number 3. And so they have the ability to basically cover exposures all over the United States, which is a real benefit to the employers who need this coverage.
So employers that are going to be eligible for this must have a majority of their business in Ohio. That was one of the key points of creating and designing this program, was to ensure that these are Ohio-based businesses that have active workers' compensation policies with BWC, that they have no coverage lapses in their BWC policy in the past 12 months, and then they have no past due balances. So they have a clean record with their workers' compensation coverage with BWC, and their majority business is in Ohio. In addition to those initial qualifiers, there's also some additional criteria for eligibility that BWC will use as they consider the eligibility and the underwriting for this coverage. One is the experience modifier of the employer, their loss history, their safety record, and then any other pertinent information that BWC would use to further consider the eligibility and the underwriting for a prospective employer for this program. Now, BWC has made it very clear that there are going to be certain employers that will not be eligible to participate in the other state's coverage program at the outset. And some of those employers include self-insuring employers, temporary employment agencies, staffing entities, and professional employer organizations, also known as PEOs. The other thing we should talk about is the experience modification factors, determination in other states. Another criteria that BWC will consider is the experience modification factor in the other states. And depending on the state, it could be determined by either NCCI or the State Rating Bureau. And in addition, if the information is available, the employer applying for coverage should provide this info to BWC to assist in the eligibility and the underwriting of the process.
So let's get in, how do you actually apply for this other state's coverage? The application form that is going to be used is the Accord 130, and basically there's some key parts of that that need to be filled out, obviously, in a correct manner. So one of the things that the Bureau has indicated too, and some of the applications that they've received to date since this program began on March 1st, they're getting a lot of the Accord 130s and they are not being signed by the employer, and they are not able to really do anything with that form and try to issue a quote until they have that signature. So make sure that the employer signs it, but that form basically contains information like the type of business, the FEIN, the states in which the coverage is being requested, the proposed effective date of the coverage, the estimated payroll for each state with which there might be an exposure, the number of employees anticipated to work in each state, and a detailed description of the work that is being done out of state. And I know that there's some space on that form where you can provide some additional remarks and get into a little bit more specific scenarios if it's a complex situation. In addition, some of the other information that would be helpful for BWC is, if it is available, a 5-year loss runs from the previous carriers if there's been coverage in place in the past. The deck page or certificate of coverage for the current policy if there is a current other state's coverage policy in place, and like Jeff already alluded to, experience modification factors out of state if those are available and if they apply. The BWC has actually created some very detailed instructions that we also have on our website about how to complete the Accord 130. And they have basically gone through section by section and put in some information to help guide agents and employers on how to properly fill out each section. And that includes putting in the limits that they have for employers' liability, location information, because that is all required in order for them to issue a policy. So I understand that it can be tricky depending on what type of business it is and you know how they're performing their jobs out of state, but that information does have to be completed. And if there's no fixed location outside of Ohio, you can enter the city and state where the work will be done. And then if there's no payroll associated with the other states, because all the payroll is being reported back to Ohio, you can basically apply for what's referred to as an if any policy.
So what's the process? Where does the employer ultimately apply for this coverage? Where does the agent submit the application? And it goes directly to BWC. So when you, the agent, advise the employer on the need for coverage and you decide that this is the option that you would like to pursue for that employer, you'll fill out the Accord 130 form, as Carolyn has discussed in detail, and you will submit it to BWC. And for any employer that you're advising on the need for this coverage, they should apply at least 60 days in advance of when they would expect or want the coverage to commence. In addition to receiving the applications, BWC then will determine the eligibility, as we talked about earlier, and then ultimately the premium cost if they decide that they want to provide the coverage to the employer. BWC will then work with USIS in Zurich to obtain a quote, and if the coverage is secured, they will issue a policy within 5 days of receiving full payment for the premium. Zurich, as it was alluded to earlier, will handle all the claims filed for benefits under the laws of the jurisdictions outside of Ohio. Again, Ohio BWC will be reinsuring all of those costs for those claims, but it will be Zurich, the out-of-state insurer and the entity providing the policy and the coverage to the Ohio employer for their out-of-state coverage that will actually handle the claims for any of those claims that the employee may file outside of the state of Ohio.
So we've had a few questions along the way about what is the interplay between the Ohio BWC policy and then the other states' coverage. What's going to be the impact on the employer? And so the other states' coverage policy, let's say it's a policy that there's zero payroll reported outside of Ohio. BWC can use the historic experience period losses and reported payroll from the other states' coverage policy in the calculation of the Ohio experience modifier. And then basically, let's talk about it if the same scenario, but you're going to have another state's coverage policy and the payroll is not reported on Ohio, but it's actually there's payroll reported outside of Ohio. And so the employer's experience is not going to be included in their Ohio experience modifier in this particular situation. Let's go on and talk a little bit about the agent's role in this whole process of obtaining the other state's coverage. First and foremost, agents are the best position to advise employers and their clients, their commercial clients, on the risk that might exist based on what type of business it is and where they're operating. Should they be having some employees travel outside of Ohio, or they have some operations that are taking place outside of Ohio. So the agent can help, complete and submit the Accord 130 form on behalf of the employer. Basically, the agent is not going to be able to bind coverage. Only BWC can bind the coverage. However, if the agent is indicated on the Accord 130, and I believe it's on the upper left-hand part of the form, there's a box where the agent puts all their information. If the agent is indicated as having been involved, the agent will be contacted with any questions if they are listed on the application. So if the application is submitted and then BWC has some questions in order, to determine the eligibility and try to figure out what the quote might be, they're going to go back to the agent in order to ask and try to get some answers to those questions. The agent will also be copied on any correspondence that takes place in regard to this coverage. So that would include the quote, the policy changes, and the final audit. And the agent will also have the ability to make changes on behalf of the employer if there's something that happens along the way where a change is necessary. The agent will also have the ability, if it was indicated that they were involved in helping with this coverage on the form, the agent will be eligible to receive a $50 application services fee. And in order to do that, as I've already said, the Bureau is going to need to have the information on the agent and the agency in order to pay this fee. The agent will also need to have a non-resident license in the state in which the coverage is being placed, E&O coverage, and also a W-9 form. And we've had some questions about what if the employer or the agent's client applies on their own for this coverage and the agent is unaware of it, but then finds out about it later. Would the agent be able to be involved? And the answer is that yes, they will be able to be involved on behalf of their client at a later point, but since they weren't involved from the start, they won't be eligible to receive the application services fee.
Yeah, I just want to point out that while employers will have the option to go directly to BWC to apply for this coverage, we do not expect many to do that. One, they're not going to have the ability to truly assess the risk that they may have as an employer through other states' workers' compensation. And that's where they're going to rely heavily on their independent insurance agent. But secondarily, they're not going to have any experience filling out the Accord 130 form, whereas agents are. And the experience in other states that have these programs that USIS is working with the state fund on is it's less than 10% of employers who go directly to that workers' compensation state fund to apply for the coverage on their own. And we don't expect anything different here in Ohio, even though we have a different structure where we do have a monopolistic system where agents aren't intimately involved in assessing workers' compensation risk. We really do not expect there to be a significant change in those numbers in terms of employers directly applying for coverage for this product outside of their agent involvement and engagement. So I want to talk a little bit real quickly about resources for agents in this program. And to start, I really want to point out that Carolyn, myself, the OIA, we've been working on this issue for a long time. And it's not just been the professional staff of the OIA, it's been agents. It's been the folks that are on this screen right now who have been involved in our workers' compensation task force, who deserve really the credit for expending a significant amount of volunteer time helping us develop the legislation, the legislative solution for this issue, seeing it through, testifying in front of the legislature on it, getting the bill passed, and then ultimately signed by the governor, and then following through with the Bureau on the implementation process, working on rules, following closely on their RFP process and the contracting and the work that they've done with USIS and Zurich, and also advising the Bureau on issues that could impact employers with this program and agents. And the folks, again, on this screen, we want to provide another thank you and just share with you that they were actively involved in designing this coverage and this solution for the needs that we've spoken of earlier in this program. In addition to that, go to our website. We've got great resources on our website in terms of the toolkit that we've put together. We've got this detailed webinar. We have a shorter version of this webinar if you just want to learn a little bit about the program and whether or not the coverage is for you. We've got extensive FAQs. We've got a customized letter for your clients. You can pull this letter off our website, put your letterhead on it, and mail it out to all of your commercial clients that you do not already have enrolled in private market coverage, and advise them and talk to them about whether or not this is a solution for you. And then we also have all of the BWC resources. So BWC's put together a lot of resources that are primarily intended for employers, a little bit for agents. That's all on our website too. But you will find our website and the information there is directly prepared for agents. It's intended for you to be able to communicate effectively with your clients on this coverage need and this being a potential solution for that need. In addition, Carolyn and myself are resources. As Carolyn mentioned, she's been actively working on this for the last 6 years. So, she is a resident expert in other states' coverage issues, and someone who I would strongly encourage any independent insurance agent out there who's working on this program to call her before they call the Bureau or before they call anyone else on this program, because Carolyn has the knowledge and history of dealing with it, and certainly I've been involved too on this issue. But we're a resource for you, and we encourage you to reach out to us and connect with us as you consider whether or not you want to enroll or advise your employers on this need.
So in addition, contact us first because we can be helpful. But we also want to point out, BWC, they have, their other states coverage unit. I believe that there's 4 or 5 people that are within that unit, but the unit is actually run by Kendra DePaul at the Bureau, and Jeff and I have a very good relationship with her. We've been working on this with her for the past several years, so we have some contact information on the screen about how you can get a hold of the other states coverage unit, either via email phone number, or there's actually on BWC's website, they have a page that they've developed that's dedicated to the other states' coverage. So we have that email or that website address on the screen as well.
Yeah, and I really want to take a moment to emphasize the great work that the Bureau of Workers' Compensation did on this program. Kendra really led up the effort in the initiative internally within the Bureau, but she worked with the administrator, Steve Buer, with their legal counsel, Sarah Morrison, and with Kelly Carey, their legislative advisor, and they did a fantastic job bringing a coalition of groups together, including the OIA and other employer groups like the Chamber and the NFIB and the Manufacturers Association, and brought us all together and worked with us to develop this solution. And they have done great stakeholder outreach throughout this process. And it's really culminated with what we have now. The opening and implementation of a program that so far has gone very smoothly, and we expect to continue to go smoothly. And if there's an issue that pops up, we're confident in working with the Bureau that you, the agent, employers, and us, we're going to be able to reach a resolution quickly with the Bureau because they've been extraordinarily responsive and they've been very proactive in developing this solution for Ohio employers. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us for this detailed discussion on Ohio's workers' compensation, other states' coverage program. Please, again, contact us if you have any questions or thoughts or need insight or advice on this program. And again, thank you, and feel free to contact us.